Welcome to a special edition of Justice. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. Tonight, an hour-long investigation into the dangers facing the U.S. power grid. What would it take to bring it down? And if our system did break down, how would you survive? And what would it be like in the dark? I'm in Lower Manhattan right now, standing in front of a power station, a typical power station. But last month I went to a meeting just a few blocks from here in the freezing cold. But when I came out of that meeting, I was frozen. Not from bitter temperatures, but from fear. I learned things that no one is talking about. Things that can change my life, your life, and the lives of everyone you know forever. I started thinking about how fragile life is and how ill-prepared we are for this. Tonight, in an exclusive justice investigation, the vulnerability of America's power system, the United States electric grid. Are we ready for a terror attack? And what would we do if the lights went out? Now, tonight is about a series of forces and individuals who, instead of doing the right thing for you and me, are playing politics and gambling with your safety and our way of life. Now, who of us could ever envision 9/11 happening? But the difference between 9/11 and what I'm about to tell you is that we know that this can happen. The question is not will it happen, but when will it happen? And the consequences would be 1,000,000 times worse than 9/11. One day, you're enjoying the comforts of life. The next, everything is different. Civilization as you know it would be gone. An electromagnetic pulse would destroy all electronics and the transformers that power everything, anything, with an on-off switch. Your hot water heater, your refrigerator, your dialysis machine. Hospitals are closed. Grocery shelves are empty. Most of the food you have at home is spoiled. And forget about your bank accounts. It doesn't matter. What you have in your pocket is all you can access. I imagine myself waking up to total darkness, nothing in my home working, food spoiled, water not running. I rummage through whatever last cans of food I can find. I'm alone because my kids and loved ones have no way to get to me. And I'm afraid to leave because it's too dangerous. People are desperate. They're hungry. Our civilization thrown back to the Dark Ages. I'm scared and helpless, and I don't know how I can survive. If there were to be such a catastrophic failure, our death toll would be staggering. A blue ribbon commission predicting mass fatalities, horrific loss of life, some even saying 9 out of 10 Americans would die. This is not science fiction. It's real. And tonight we'll tell you about the ways that it could happen. Solar flare.
Scientists are watching the largest sunspot in almost 25 years, sending out flares that disrupt navigation systems and radio communications. The sunspot is 20 times the size of the surface of the Earth. The flares then produce as much energy as 1 billion nuclear bombs. So what happens if there's a direct hit from a giant solar flare? With me now, the founder and president of the Center for Security Policy, Frank Gaffney. Good evening, Frank. So what does happen if there is this giant solar flare that hits us?
Well, it's a matter of some speculation, but I think the general consensus among scientists is it's going to be very bad for an electrified society like ours. What we have to go by is an event that happened about 155 years ago when a similar-sized solar storm caused mass disruption of the only sort of quasi-electrified system we had at the time, which were telegraph offices and wires. They caught on fire. This society, dependent as it is on electrification, and systems that would be devastated by this kind of electromagnetic energy would probably grind to a screeching halt. And the loss of life as a result would be in the tens, if not hundreds of millions.
All right, Frank, you and I on this show have talked a lot about the fact that the grid needs to be strengthened to withstand these solar flares, which seem to be on the increase as of late. The impending Carrington event, which is going to happen, is just a question of when. So why is it that the local electric companies are not strengthening the grid on their own?
Well, it's kind of unbelievable. You know, the NASA put out a press release after the second anniversary of one of these very close calls 2 years ago, and they said the probability of this happening in the next decade is 12%. That's a little better than Russian roulette with a 6-cylinder revolver, but not much. And the question is an apt one, Judge, and I think the answer is the utilities have to this point, and they own 85% of the assets of this infrastructure, this critical grid. They have been able to sort of brazen it out to this point. There's a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that's supposed to oversee them, but essentially they write their own standards. And to this point, they have chosen to dumb down the standards to the point where against this kind of intense electromagnetic solar storm kind of event, the only protection we're likely to see is not really for the grid, it's liability protection for these industries.
Okay.
And that's a scandal.
We've talked about this before. FERC is almost like a trade union for these local electric companies. What do we need?
Well, that's the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, right, or NERC. FERC is overseeing them, but there's something called regulatory capture that's at work here, it seems. They are not providing the kind of independent oversight. Maybe that's because they're populated by a bunch of lawyers and political hacks instead of scientists and engineers.
The energy given off by the sun. The SDO satellite records the ultraviolet radiation released by our star. Charged particles, fractions of atoms, protons, electrons, and neutrons are constantly thrown out, along with massive pulses of electromagnetic radiation. But occasionally, the sun throws out what's known as a coronal mass ejection. This supercomputer visualization shows a cloud of plasma millions of kilometers wide, racing towards the Earth. If these solar particles were free to hit the Earth's surface, they would do serious damage to any living thing, producing fatal mutations in their DNA. Fortunately, the Earth has a defense. An invisible force field called the magnetosphere surrounds our planet, visualized here in unprecedented detail. These images are generated by data from 5 magnetically tuned satellites. Called Themis, the network of spacecraft reveals the force field as it is constantly bombarded by the sun. The shape of the field is produced by the sheer force of the radiation hitting it. A nebulous teardrop 200,000 miles in diameter. As wave upon wave of solar particles strike the magnetosphere, most are deflected. But when a coronal mass ejection arrives, the charged particles peel open the magnetic field's outer layer. The particles are now free to rush in towards the planet. The Earth's inner magnetic field steers the radiation towards the poles, triggering one of nature's most remarkable sights. The Northern and the Southern Lights. And here, we can see the Earth's second layer of defense. Giant ribbons of plasma stream downwards, encircling both the North and South poles. As they strike the upper atmosphere at extreme speed, they excite the molecules of air. The process makes the air molecules glow. The oxygen radiates red and green, the nitrogen blue. Energy that would otherwise mutate all life on Earth is dissipated by the upper atmosphere. In this way, the Earth has shielded itself from the sun's deadly radiation.
What has been will be again, what has been done will be done again, there is nothing new under the sun. Ecclesiastes 1:9. The first time around, Satan and the other fallen angels came to earth and created an offspring of giants, but the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Genesis 6:2 and 4. These giants would have two goals. One would be to breed out the seed of Adam and Eve's descendants. The second would be to build a machine that could access the gateways talked about through Scripture, a machine that could access heaven and hell, to free Satan and the other angels. This would be the reason for the impossible pyramids built around the world and even at the bottom of what is now oceans. These pyramids were built on the Earth's natural energy lines or ley lines, and were aimed at harnessing the energy produced by the Earth's rotation. The Earth, however, emits a natural 432 Hz frequency, which at the time supported a vapor canopy around the Earth, and God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." Genesis 1:6. This is why people lived so long before the flood and only up to 120 after the flood. The sun's radiation ages us more than any other factor. Anyways, this machine altered Earth's frequency and brought down the firmament and triggered God's preordained judgment with a great flood. The second time around, the fallen angel seed and the giants re-emerged through Ham's children. One can only assume his wife must have carried the DNA. And well, until you know it, this time they got right back to the same stuff. They said, "Come, let us build for ourselves a